Good morning, everyone. Hello, bonjour. I want to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered here on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat nations who have called this land home since immemorial. Thank you for being with us here today. It's a great pleasure to join so many of our caucus colleagues, local elected officials, police association leaders, and our speakers for today. The Honourable Sean Fraser, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, the Honourable Doug Downey, the Attorney General of Ontario, Mayor Patrick Brown, and OPP Commissioner Thomas Carrique. As Minister Fraser has often said, the Government of Canada is focused on creating safe communities and ensuring our justice system is trusted, fair, and effective. Our efforts rest on three pillars: strengthening Canada's criminal laws, supporting our frontline enforcement and investigating, supporting our frontline officers in law enforcement, and investing in long-term crime prevention measures. Over the past year, we introduced a number of key bills to strengthen our criminal laws. We introduced legislation that would combat hate, that would protect people from visiting their religious places of worship, and we introduced legislation that would protect victims and keep our kids safe online. And that would give legislation that would give law enforcement the tools they need to move more quickly to investigate serious threats and disrupt organized crime. But today, we're here to talk about bail and sentencing reform. The Act received royal assent just last week and will soon come into force. This is a sweeping set of reforms that will make bail laws stricter and sentencing laws tougher for repeat violent offenders. These sweeping reforms are the result of several months of close collaboration and consultations with provinces and territories which are responsible for the administration of justice, as well as law enforcement on the ground. These reforms will help curb the scourge of auto theft, for example. We've seen an uptick in auto theft in the GTA in the past, and I know many of you have covered stories on that. I'm happy to report that we've seen a decrease in auto theft in Ontario of about 40%. That is a big victory. We've also introduced this to fight issues of extortion and organized crime that we've been seeing growing in our communities. In fact, while this is an improvement, we've seen many improvements in many areas, especially in the area of auto theft. We want to continue to bring it down even more and help tackle all forms of violent crime. That's what today is all about. These crimes are serious threats to public safety and ones that line the pockets of organized crime groups, whether that be street gangs or sophisticated transnational networks. Thanks to the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act, courts now have more tools to curtail these crimes, the measures that strengthen bail and sentencing laws in the criminal code. There's been a lot of advocacy done in order to get us to this day here today. So in particular, I really want to thank all the members of Parliament that are here. And of course, the next speaker that I'm about to introduce has been a great ally in the fight against crime. So now I'd like to invite Mayor Brown to the podium. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to welcome Justice Minister Sean Fraser to Brampton, my good friend Doug Downey, the Attorney General for the Province of Ontario. We have Brampton City Councillors here, law enforcement leaders, and community partners here at Brampton City Hall for this exciting announcement. Today is an important day for public safety in Canada. And actually, I want to thank Ruby Sahota first of all. It's her birthday today. So what a great birthday gift. What a great birthday gift. A step forward for public safety in Canada. And this is particularly important for Brampton because for many years we've been on the forefront of advocating for meaningful bail reform. As a member of the Peel Police Services Board and as mayor, I've repeatedly raised concerns about a justice system that too often allowed repeat violent offenders to cycle through a revolving door of arrests, release, and reoffending. Our advocacy in Brampton began following the tragic murder of Darian Henderson Bellman in July of 2020. Darian was killed by an individual who had repeatedly breached release conditions and had been granted bail multiple times despite a documented history of violence. Her death devastated her family, shocked our community, and became a catalyst for change. It's actually when we launched our Bail Reform Now petition. Since then, Brampton has consistently called on the federal government to strengthen Canada's bail system and ensure that public safety remains paramount in bail decisions. Unfortunately, Darian's case was not an isolated incident. Over the past several years, communities across Canada have witnessed the devastating consequences of repeat violent offending. We have seen the impact of organized crime, escalating extortion attempts, auto theft rings, home invasions, firearm offenses, and intimate partner violence. Our residents have been clear. They want a justice system that protects victims, prioritizes public safety, and holds serious offenders accountable. That's why today's announcement is so important. Bill C-14 delivers significant reforms that municipalities, police leaders, victims advocates, and provincial governments have been calling for. The new reverse onus provisions, tougher sentencing measures, stronger consequences for repeat violent offenders, and targeted action against organized crime, auto theft, and extortion represent a substantial step forward. I want to thank Prime Minister Mark Carney, Minister Sean Fraser, Secretary of State Ruby Sahota, and the federal government for listening to cities across Canada and law enforcement for actually acting on these concerns. I also want to acknowledge the work of Peel Regional Police Chief Nishan Dirapa and our Police Services Board that have been advocates for this reform, and I know those concerns have been raised by police bodies across the country. While today's announcement is significant, we also recognize that this legislation alone is not enough. And I have to say, it's pretty exciting to see the bills being presented by this government. Successful implementation will require continued collaboration among all orders of government. We all have to own our areas of responsibility. It will require adequate resources for policing, prosecution services, courts, victim supports, bail supervision programs, and correctional facilities. The goal must be clear: fewer victims, safer communities, and greater confidence in our justice system. Brampton and communities across Canada have been calling for action for years because we have seen firsthand the consequences of dangerous offenders being released, and despite the clear risk to public safety. Today, we are seeing meaningful progress. It's a great day for Canada, a great day for our community. So on behalf of the City of Brampton, I want to thank our federal and provincial partners for working together to advance these reforms. We owe it to victims, their families, and every resident deserves to feel safe in their community. Now, without further ado, I'll introduce the Honourable Sean Fraser, the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada. And I just want to say about Sean, thank you for listening. Thank you for acting. This is a really hands-on minister. And I have to say how refreshing it was when you were drafting this legislation. He took time to sit down with the Peel Regional Police, invite us up to his office in Ottawa to share input, share concerns. And I just knew from that meeting, and I know Councillor Torr was there too, for that meeting in Ottawa, we just felt that you understood the issue and that you were going to bring meaningful change to this issue that so many of our residents were passionate about. So thank you for your leadership. With no further ado, the Minister of Justice of Canada, Sean Fraser.
Mayor Brown, thanks so much for hosting us here in Brampton. It's an honor to be here with you. Ruby, thanks for playing MC today, and happy birthday, of course. And I want to thank others representing our caucus in Ottawa who've joined for today's announcement, the Provincial Government of Ontario, but most of all, the frontline law enforcement that you see standing behind us. Of course, as the Mayor indicated, Bill C-14, the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act, has now become law in Canada. This is a direct response to the concerns that we heard from communities across this country who said that they wanted to see more action when it came to home invasions, when it came to auto theft, when it came to violent extortion that they're witnessing in their communities, when they see sexual assaults, when they see episodes of drug trafficking or human trafficking. It needs to stop. And people demand that the government take it seriously, not only in the words that we express at microphones, but in the laws that we adopt in our legislatures. The main purpose for my being here today is not so much to walk you through the different aspects of the law, but it's to say thank you. I want to just draw attention to the fact that this bill was not developed behind closed doors on Parliament Hill. It was informed by people who run the systems that are responsible for justice in this country and those who live most closely to the problems. The Mayor was very generous in his words, saying perhaps he got the sense that I understood the nature of the problem. I can tell you that that understanding isn't born and bred exclusively from my hometown in rural Nova Scotia, but from the shared experience, for example, of members of Parliament who showed up in Ottawa, including members of Parliament from this city, who came to Ottawa and shared very explicitly with me that we needed to take a stronger approach when it came to violent repeat offenders, particularly on issues like extortion, home invasions, and auto theft. We heard from city leaders across this country, including the Mayor of Brampton himself, who's been calling upon the federal government for a number of years now to stiffen sentences for violent repeat offenders and to make it harder for someone who has a history of repeat offending to receive bail. We had an opportunity to engage directly with law enforcement who shared with us their experience, their frustration on seeing the offenders that they dealt with last week causing some grievous harm to another innocent person the following week. But I want to say thank you in particular as well to Attorney General Downey. Doug, your partnership on this particular bill could not be overstated. I can't tell you how many times I picked up the phone last summer when we were considering what ideas to include in this bill. And I can trace back a number of the specific measures directly to those conversations, including how the principle of restraint is going to be applied at bail, including specifically in a reverse onus, why an offender and how an offender will be required to demonstrate that their release would allow the court to protect public safety rather than leaving that onus rest with the Crown. It's through the engagement of the provinces that run the systems of justice, from the police leadership who know what it's like to work on the ground, and from the cities who hear most closely and directly the experiences of their constituents, and from my colleagues who've been elected from the greater Brampton area, I see Vince has joined us here, to advocate on behalf of the communities they represent at home. This bill is stronger for that level of engagement. It was an exercise in collaboration unlike any other I've seen in 11 years, and I believe communities will be safer for it. To the extent you see changes in the way the bail system operates when it comes to violent and repeat offenders, know that it's the people who are standing behind me today that had a profound impact that have led to a legal change that's going to help deliver safety for communities. As the Mayor indicated in his remarks, we know that a single piece of criminal law isn't in and of itself going to cure Canada's public safety issues, but it's going to have an impact. And as we move forward with tougher bail for violent repeat offenders, stricter sentences for those who've got a history of violent crime, we are also equipping law enforcement with new tools to help them keep up with changes to the way that crime is conducted in this country, including new tools to access evidence that's tied to crimes that have been committed digitally. We have new laws being put in place to help combat hate in this country, new protections for against intimate partner violence and for exploitation of children in the real world and online. But we also know the long term is going to demand that we work across levels of government to make investments in affordable and supportive housing, in mental health, in addictions, and in at-risk youth programs that help pull people away from a criminal lifestyle earlier on in their lives. But with the continued collaboration across levels of government, across party lines, and across every region of this country, we can and we will deliver a safer Canada for all. Thank you. And the one job I was given at the microphone was to introduce the next speaker, Attorney General Doug Downey. Thanks so much for being here.
I'd rather you forget to introduce me but say those nice things. It's fantastic. just lower that a little bit. Thank you. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here, and it's a pleasure to join the stage with my colleagues, federal and provincial and municipal. I want to congratulate Minister Fraser on shepherding these changes through. It was not a straight line, and I know that there are always challenges in bringing significant change, and this is significant change. It's going to make a difference in our communities right across Canada. It's not just a Brampton thing, it's not just an Ontario thing. These changes will have an impact right across the country. And as you know, these things don't happen in a vacuum. And he's absolutely right. What a sense of relief when those phone calls started, when Minister Fraser said, we need to do something, give me your ideas. And he collected ideas both from us and from the municipalities and from the police and from other people on the front lines. And that approach has made all the difference, because these changes are not only significant, they're practical. But we have to make sure that the province does its part. And I've heard Minister Fraser say that before, that this law is not going to fix everything. The provinces have a role to play. And we are ready. We were anticipating, hopeful, that something like this would come along. So we started many years ago building systems, modernizing the system, putting cameras in courtrooms. We'll have 340-ish courtrooms fully wired by the end of the year. The digital information repository we started in 2023 is now scaled through Toronto, all the Northeast, Northwest, and will be the rest of the province. That brings important documents into one system. We have the $170 million digital transformation project that feeds both Superior Court and Ontario Court. It's cutting edge. We're being looked at from around the world. Singapore is looking to adopt what we've done. We have some amazing things that we put in place. But those tools without the rules would not work. And so now we have the rules. And I'm just absolutely thrilled, and I just want to thank Ruby and Sean and Vince and your colleagues for, I don't want to say being brave, but it took some courage to translate what we were hearing on the front lines, to change the criminal code, to allow us to do what we need to do, to keep criminals behind bars, to make people show why they should be out, to up the level for reverse onus, to expand reverse onus. We're making changes in bail and surety to match that. We introduced some just in the spring. So this is just a fantastic moment to mark when cooperation can turn into action. And that's exactly what it's done. So thank you again, Minister Fraser. This just would not have happened without you and with your approach. So thank you again. Merci, Megwich. And now I would like to introduce Commissioner Carrique, and I want to thank him for his leadership across Ontario. Things would not be as they are if it were not for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'm before you this morning on behalf of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and I would like to start by thanking both Minister Downey and Minister Fraser for their leadership towards public safety. Minister Downey referenced courage. This is a fine example of responsibility. When a province and the federal government work together, what we can achieve in the view of public safety across this country. And this legislation is very personal to me. Many of you may have heard me speak at the funeral of Provincial Constable Tyrone Bali just last week, and reference that since 2020, there have been more than 15 police officers murdered across this country, 4 of which were OPP officers, including in December 2022, when Provincial Constable Greg Pershella was murdered by a repeat violent offender who was operating a stolen motor vehicle. I've said it before, that murder was preventable. The changes we will see in Bill C-14, I hope and I pray, if executed as designed, will prevent further violence in our communities. It will protect your police officers. It will protect victims of crime. It does what legislation should do. It gives trust and confidence in a judicial system if properly administered. It prioritizes the innocent while ensuring that public safety is at the forefront by denunciation and deterrence through sentencing and a proper bail system. And in closing, Minister Fraser, thank you for highlighting the holistic nature of our justice system and the commitment of your government to continue to give law enforcement the tools we need. You specifically referenced lawful access, and that is the next piece of this complex puzzle. Those of you in the media will have heard from Chief Demkew just a week ago speaking about guns for hire and how it's all being done through encrypted platforms. I'm hopeful that the government can come together at all levels in a nonpartisan way and ensure lawful access legislation is in place to support the incredible progress we've seen under C-14. Merci, miigwech. And I am sorry, Deputy, my only responsibility, my only assigned task was to introduce Deputy Chief Nick Milinovich. Nick, please come forward.
Thank you, Commissioner, although I'm not sure I wanted to follow that. Very well done. Thank you. The reality is I'm going to keep my remarks fairly short, but I do think it's important that I share some perspective. And really, it's my privilege to be here to speak about an issue that matters incredibly to our community. Public safety is not optional. It is our, as a police service, primary responsibility for our organization. In fact, our community demands public safety. In addition to public safety, they also demand accountability from the people that attempt to take that from them. And I want to share some perspective. In 2024, our community experienced carjackings that rose by roughly 83% in 1 year. Home invasions jumped by 197%. And extortions targeting our South Asian business community jumped by 268% over the course of 1 year. Our police service, thanks to the support of Mayor Brown, our police services board, has invested heavily into those areas of priority to fight those crimes. We've made our teams larger. We've arrested and charged more people than we ever have for those types of offenses. And thankfully, we have made a difference. We are seeing year-over-year reductions. We are making a difference. But the difficulty becomes we also need our laws to support us as well. And today's announcement is a great example of that. It puts a greater weight on community safety and introduces stronger conditions for violent repeat offenders that would target our community. It brings together sentencing for serious crimes like auto theft, extortions, carjackings, and home invasions. Repeat violent offenders will face tougher consequences, and it will help place our community first. This is very important because we see the impacts of repeat violent offenders on a daily basis here in Peel, across our province, and really across our country. Our officers work incredibly hard to protect our community, but find themselves dealing over and over again with the same individuals. In reality, just this past weekend, a number of officers, while they were out protecting our community, doing proactive patrol and attempting to arrest an individual that had a history with an illegal firearm, were shot at. It was a near miss. We feel incredibly thankful that nobody was hurt, but it's a demonstration of the reality that our people, police officers, and our community are facing. Prior to this legislation, the majority of people that our police service held for bail on firearms-related offenses were ultimately and eventually released on bail. This bill and legislation will help close that gap. It's about breaking the violent cycle of repeat crime. Yesterday on Father's Day, I had the opportunity, and Mayor Brown mentioned him, Paul Henderson. Almost 6 years ago, he lost his daughter to an individual who has been charged with her murder. He was on numerous conditions, had a history of violent crime, and today he's actually at the first day of the prelim. I had an opportunity to speak to him yesterday on Father's Day and share some of the information and the changes that this bill will bring forward. And he is adamant that had stronger, stricter bail conditions and sentences been in place, he could have celebrated Father's Day with his daughter yesterday. So he'd asked me to share that with you. Again, this legislation is an important step forward. It will help us protect our community, prevent a victim, and hold the people that target our community accountable. And very simply put, stronger laws mean safer communities. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes official remarks, but I did want to make a couple of honorable mentions. I wanted to mention Deputy Commissioner Brian Larkin from the RCMP that is here with us today. And of course, the members of Parliament, starting with the Parliamentary Secretary for Combating Crime, Vince Gasparo, Member of Parliament for Brampton Centre, Amandeep Sodhi, Member of Parliament Sonia Sidhu, Member of Parliament Faris Al-Sood, Member of Parliament Ikwinder Kahir as well for being with us. And I know Mayor Brown, we've got some of your members of council here as well, and I wanted to say thank you so much for all of the advocacy work that you've done behind the scenes to get us to this point. I know that this is going to make a huge impact in 2025. When we were elected, we committed ourselves to making our communities safe and doing everything possible at the federal level to make sure that Canadians have the safety that they deserve in our country. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. And who is going to? Julie is going to run the questions. Okay, perfect.
Hi, everyone. We'll now take questions from the media. If you just come over here to the mic and state your name and outlet. And just a reminder that it's one question and one follow-up. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Nitin Chopra from #Media. Minister, thanks for giving this important legislation to the Canadians, which was quite overdue for a long time. Earlier, the onus was lying between federal and province because that was switching, and roller coaster was going on. Like province should have more jails, and federal is not bringing C-14. Now, thanks for that this legislation. Hopefully, that piece is fixed now, and Canadians see a step in the right direction. If you can clarify 2 points. Any violent offender of crime, either it's a first-time offender or a repeat offender, because we have heard repeat offenders. If it is a first-time offender, the judges will not release them on a bail. It will be a mandatory sentence, and province will have enough jails to keep them. And also part B, if any home intruder, armed home intruder enters our home, the Canadians have a full right to defend themselves in any means, by any means, and they won't be get charged. Thank you.
Look, thanks very much for the question. And before you got to the two specific questions, you gave a sort of preamble about the federal government and provincial government going back and forth. I don't think there's a single Canadian, there's certainly not one that I've spoken to, who's interested in seeing more finger pointing between levels of government. They want us to work together to promote public safety. The model of collaboration that we've adopted in the context of the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act, I believe can and should be repeated in other contexts, so we can focus on demonstrating progress rather than seeking to shift blame. The first question was about a first-time offender versus a repeat offender. Certainly the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act has a distinct focus on violent repeat offenders, but you should also know that there's changes made to the legislation around what's known as the principle of restraint to clarify that in all instances, not just when you're dealing with a repeat offender, the court needs to be satisfied that the release of a person can be done in a way that won't compromise the public safety imperative. We have put directly in the legislation, this is actually a great source of collaboration with the provincial government and Attorney General Downey in particular, to insist that that individual needs to have the public safety outcome managed before a court can consider their release. The other grounds for releasing someone, about whether they would show up in court, for example, or whether their release would call into question the repute of the justice system, will remain in place. But both the seriousness of the offence and the number of offences will be considered going forward. On the second question that you've asked, let me just be unequivocal. You as a Canadian have the right to defend yourself inside your home with the use of reasonable force. That's a law that pre-existed not just the current government, pre-existed my time of politics. The law most recently changed when Prime Minister Harper was in office. I support the change that the last Conservative government made when it comes to ensuring that you have the ability to defend yourself in your home. Of course, these are the kinds of questions that we'll continue to deal with as public safety issues remain at the forefront for Canadians. But whether it's defending yourself in your home or having the courts ensure that the public safety outcome can be managed, these are important issues, and the laws on the books will help deliver better public safety outcomes.
Follow-up is our police officers, frontline officers, they face everyday dangers on the line of duty to keep communities safe. And Deputy Chief Nick Milinovich already mentioned yesterday's event where was the repeat offender. He had the firearm banned and he shot at our police officers. Some are injured. And we have seen many lives lost, as OPP officer also mentioned that. Question is, like Premier Ford quoted many times in his press conferences, and we would like to hear from the Attorney General Downey also, that he quoted that judges are politically appointed and they run a political agenda rather than public safety concerns. How to fix that? And Minister Fraser, you also, if you can let us know, is that in your agenda to bring the justice reforms? Because there is an issue with the justice reform, we know. When our leaders, Premier, when they mention and how to fix the judicial justice reform, is that in your agenda? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and to nutshell that, you're asking if there's pending changes in terms of how judges are appointed. I can tell you, I appoint the judges to the Ontario Court of Justice. They do 90% of the criminal. I appoint the JPs, the Justices of the Peace, and we've done several over the last couple of years. And then, of course, the federal government appoints Superior Court judges and the Court of Appeal. We work in collaboration on a number of things, so there is a conversation that happens. We're pretty focused on the mechanics, the rules, and the tools at the moment to make sure that they land and that they're effective. So that's where our agenda is at the moment, is making sure that those things are happening. As this bill comes alive next month, we will see retraining have to happen for JPs and for judges in terms of what the reverse onus means, in terms of that measure of effectiveness. So this will have an impact on all the judges in terms of what they're required to operate by, and the principle of restraint as well.
Yeah, Minister Fraser, if is judicial reform on the agenda?
So just first in the preamble, you pointed out what is perhaps painfully obvious to the policing community in Ontario. You're absolutely right to say that there are people at risk, or who are at risk, because they're busy keeping the rest of the community safe. This is a particularly difficult few weeks as we've seen the deaths of 2 police officers in this province. I don't know how people continue to carry themselves with such composure as we've seen the law enforcement community over the past few weeks. My best friend growing up is a member of the RCMP. I can tell you the entire policing community feels it when there is a life needlessly taken. Though outside the scope of your question, which I'll address in just a moment, there is a provision in this bill that seeks to better protect our first responders who are defending our community and at the same time placing themselves at risk by increasing sentences with an aggravating factor for someone who would commit a crime against a first responder in the line of duty. On the question about judicial appointments, as my counterpart pointed out, the federal government has responsibility for superior courts. Less often will they be engaged on matters of bail, but we still want to insist that we have the very best. The process that we put in place has an independent body examine each applicant to the bench. We have historically only chosen from amongst those candidates who are recommended or highly recommended that have come through that independent process. On the back end, as we make legal changes, we remain engaged with the judiciary, who of course has independence to make decisions after the moment of their appointment. But we do work with national organizations to ensure there's appropriate training in place, for example, particularly particularly when we do see widespread changes to the laws, such as you've seen in criminal justice reform over the past few weeks. So this will be an issue where we remain engaged, not so much to try to critique an individual judge or start pointing out where they need to be better, but making sure as we give law enforcement the tools that they need to do the job well, that we have the tools and the training in place to ensure the judiciary has the means to deliver on the mandate that's now included with changes to the law, such as Bill C-14. Thank you.
Rahim Ladani with CTV News. A question for the Attorney General. It's been well documented that Ontario remand centres are overcrowded. If this law puts more people into those centres, what's the plan to house them, and how can you actually guarantee their safety before they've been found guilty?
Thank you for that question. One, we're doing a couple of things all at the same time. We are building new facilities, but we're reopening old facilities that were closed by the previous government, several of them. We also, in cooperation with the federal government, if an individual has been sentenced and they're beyond the period they should be in a provincial jail, then they're in a federal facility, and so we've optimized that transfer. That creates capacity for us for remand. So we're really doing a few things at the same time in the multi-billion-dollar range, and we can of course get you more details on the where and the when on some of them. But again, this was something that we were anticipating might happen, and so we started the work about a year ago.
For Deputy Chief Milinovich, actually, as a follow-up, I've spoken with a lot of officers who tell me that they're quite frustrated when they go out, they arrest someone, and then they see them on the street a week later. How much has this affected morale on the front lines, and what do you think the effect is going to be with this legislation? Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I think generally speaking, most police officers here in Peel, and for that matter anywhere in the province or country, would identify that it is frustrating. It's concerning, but this becomes why it's so important that, as police leaders, we're moving beyond what you would just expect traditionally from police leaders. It's not just about enforcement. It's looking for the opportunity to identify gaps that are leading to that frustration, and then advocating, like we've done with Mayor Brown and our Police Services Board, advocating for the change so they don't have to experience that frustration. And my hope is that we are going to continue, because of this legislation, to see fewer and fewer repeat violent criminals being released back into our community after our officers have done what they should do, which is conduct an investigation and arrest and charge people who are targeting our community.
Hi, John Woodward from CTV News. This question's for Ruby Sahota. Commissioner Carrique alluded to the shootings of the synagogues and so on earlier today, and last week you got up in the House of Commons to talk about a foreign entity that has been commissioning them. We know from some American criminal filings that point to Iran. I just wondered if you could tell us who is the foreign entity you're talking about, and what can you tell us about that entity?
Yeah. So in reference to my comments in the House, I was referencing the reports that I have seen coming out of the United States and from the GTA here as well, from various news outlets. And so I was just referencing those news reports.
Okay. And this next one for Commissioner Carrique. You mentioned, the very real dangers frontline officers face and some of the consequences as being off work in WSIB. We've been talking to a group of officers on WSIB leave and their accountant who are concerned that because of recent changes to how their compensation is calculated, they're being disadvantaged, and their accountant is concerned the money's not going to the CRA correctly. Just one example was a fellow who made $120,000.
Yes, I can help you out. I did not mention anything about people being off work through WSIB, and that is not relevant to this discussion, but I thank you for the question.
Okay, I guess the question was about a fellow paying $9 in tax. So I was hoping you could just tell us what's going on with that.
You want to follow up with me offline and separately? We'd be happy to help you out. Thank you.
Hi, Graham Frist from the Brampton Guardian. As the mayor and everybody mentioned, there have been calls for these changes for a long time. So what were the stumbling blocks? Why did it take so long for the government to act in this regard? Mr. Fraser.
For me?
Yeah.
Look, these things are falling on me. I can only really speak with firsthand knowledge from my own appointment into this position. As you can appreciate, with different responsibilities before this moment, I was aware of some of the initiatives that were going on, but not personally as plugged into these conversations. I would see there'd be some positive steps taken with new scanning facilities at different transportation hubs. There'd be some steps taken on the bail system, for example, or to deal with violent repeat offenders with Bill C-48. But there was a massive sea change that took place when Mark Carney became the Prime Minister of Canada. During the first conversation that I had, when at the time I had not been planning to run for office again prior to the last election, he called and asked if I would serve in this particular capacity, not when he recruited me to run, but after the election. And at that point in time, he raised as a top priority the need to implement serious criminal justice reforms. That process started in earnest. Of course, the cabinet swearing in was in May. Very quickly, the House shut down last summer. And we got to work. It was a matter of days before my first conversations outside of my own department, where we wanted to engage the voices of cities, of provinces, and of police leadership. Over the course of last summer, there was hardly a day went by that wasn't filled with phone calls in the calendar with people who were working every day closest to the problems that we were trying to solve. Though it may seem now a year removed from that point in time, like it's taken some time, the bills were tabled early in the fall of 2025 and have made it through Parliament much more quickly than would typically be the case. So although there were calls that preceded the Prime Minister's term in office, I can tell you from the moment that he assumed the position, he made a very clear public commitment, including in the last federal election campaign platform, and we have been working with our shoulder to the wheel every day since. So I would disagree that there has been delay from that particular moment in time, but I would be the first to acknowledge that perhaps under the previous government we could have and should have gone further. But let's not rehash the challenges of the past. Let's focus on listening to the people who know how to solve these problems today and put their advice into action.
Hi, good afternoon. Lauren Battigello with CBC News. My first question is for Minister Fraser. The Conservatives say that statistics for crime have increased over the last 11 years. So what do you say to your critics that say that the Liberal government has made the country a more dangerous place?
Well, you have to take with a grain of salt anything you hear from somebody who's got a vested interest in you believing a particular thing, whether it's true or not. It is true that crime is different and higher today than a number of different points in our history, but if you actually look at the last few years, we are trending in the right direction, and the trend is extremely important. Look at some of the numbers around home invasions and auto theft, some of which were referenced today that we would be happy to back up. But when you realize that certain political actors routinely say that their opponents are terrible and everything is bad and you should blame them, sometimes it may be their political motivation that's speaking. But I'm not asking you to just accept my word for it. I'm asking you to consider the actual text of the legislation that we put in, the most serious set of reforms in a generation to Canada's criminal laws when it comes to bail and sentencing. There's some people who are joining us here today that don't necessarily share my party political affiliation, but they have some real equity in this conversation. We just heard from the head of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. We've just heard from local police leadership. We've got the National Police Federation represented here. We have the Attorney General in Doug Ford's Conservative Ontario with the Federal Attorney General from Mark Carney's Liberal government from Nova Scotia. We've got the Mayor of Brampton, who's been calling for action for many years. None of these people have any interest in my political fortune. They have an interest in keeping Canadian communities safe. When you can divorce the political expediency from comments or criticisms of the Leader of the Opposition, you can realize that we've done our job not because we're better or smarter than anybody else, but because we listen to people who understand the problem. So don't take my word for it. Don't take my opposition's either. Do the work to understand the changes yourself, and hopefully you can trust the folks in uniform who've joined us today.
I just want to follow up as well and switch gears a little bit for you as well, Minister Fraser. Just wondering if you might have any more reflections on MAID for mental illness, and just if you have any word on how soon you might be prepared to make a decision on the possible expansion of MAID.
First, let me thank members of the Special Joint Committee that was struck to examine this particular issue. The report having just been tabled in the House of Commons, I have now started to dig into, but as I've said publicly before, I want the opportunity not only to review the recommendations of the committee members, but also the evidence upon which their recommendation was based. I expect over the next few weeks I'll have an opportunity to complete that review. That's going to follow with some engagement on my part with individuals, with experts that I understand the nuances of these and other issues related to medical assistance in dying. I expect sometime over the course of the summer. I don't have a date circled on the calendar because I want to give myself space to do the work and to do it well. But I expect over the course of the summer we will be in a position to understand the path forward, including the next steps, if any, on this particular issue as it relates to medical assistance in dying.
Thank you. And I just have one quick follow for the Attorney General.
Just one question for today. Thank you so much. And this will be the last reporter.
Gordon Anderson from the Toronto Sun. This is for Minister Downey. Now, Paul, I apologize if this question has been answered previously in the last few minutes, but we'll try it again. Maybe not. I'm not sure. So apologies. Okay, now that this federal legislation is passed, will the province be updating their training manuals for judges, justices of the peace, police, and prosecutors?
Thank you for the question. So there are different avenues there. I'll start with the prosecution manual, which some of you may or may not know is a totally non-political exercise. I'm in the midst of doing exactly that and have been for several months. So that will come out in stages. That's the Crown Prosecution Manual. The others for judges training and justice of the peace training, that's part of the independence of the judiciary, but we do work with them to highlight what we think are important. We put Kira's Law in, for instance, last year, and that mandates that there be some review. Now, what I did do on the judicial application form, there's now a box where that lawyer who's applying to be a judge checks and gives an undertaking, which is a legal promise with consequences, that they will do the training provided by the judiciary when they're appointed. So that wasn't necessarily always happening. That is now happening. So we are doing what we can in that regard, but I can tell you the Justice of the Peace and the leadership at the Ontario Court of Justice do stay very current on where we're headed, and they're very aware of this change in C-14.
Thank you.
And that concludes today's announcement. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.